Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021 Garrison Board of Education Workshop Meeting. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apicello. Here. David Gelber.
Here.
Madeline Julian.
Here.
Courtney McCarthy.
Here.
Kent Schott.
Here.
Matthew Spicer.
Here.
Sarah Tormey.
Here. Thank you. Now I'll rise for the pledge relief.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Up next, we have accept agenda changes. Does anyone have any proposed changes to this evening's agenda?
Should I just make a motion to move public comment up to after the presentation, just to keep the practice alive?
Are we all in favor of that?
Honestly, I mean, for tonight's presentation, I think we should keep, I don't think we should permanently move it. I think we should take it meeting by meeting. It's sort of, I have always felt it depends on the presentation that might warrant more public input, but I also think that there's value to public comment coming at the end of the meeting after a number of business items have been discussed that may or may not be interesting or pose more information. And it's funny because a couple of years ago I felt really strongly that it should be at the very beginning. And now now I've come around to the other side. But for communications, I mean, it doesn't look like we've got a line out the door, but communications might, prompt some public comments. But I think it really depends. So I guess I have a little bit of a pushback there.
Right, I totally understand. That's why I just wanted it to be after the presentation. Make sure that the public got to see that important kind of new piece of information and then have the opportunity, but.
Anyone else have thoughts they wish to share regarding moving public comment?
It's going to be like a divisive vote. I'd rather just pull it, right? It's like.
I guess it would be something interesting to discuss, but.
We can put it on later. So this evening, would we like to move public comment up to after the presentation?
I mean, doesn't really matter.
Okay. Looks like we have consensus. Be it resolved that the Board of Education. What?
Sorry, I was thinking a lot. It was unclear as to whether there was going to be a public comment based on. Maybe there will be. Seems like it may be a moot point, but sure. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Try not to giggle at that. But yes, all right. So be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accepts the agenda as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. And we can have further discussion on that at another time. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have the communications plan update. All right.
All right. Apologies for speaking to the back of your head, but good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having me back. Tonight, a little bit of a different topic. We'd like to take a look at some of the work we've been doing thus far around district communications, as well as the proposed path forward and the kind of discussions we want to have around it over the course of this year. And so I'm just going to dive right in and go through some of the process and the thinking that I've had on this topic thus far. So the first thing that's important to consider is what actually a communications plan entails. At first glance, it sounds fairly straightforward. It's how the district communicates with the community. And at its core, that is true, but there are a lot of moving pieces that are involved with this, and they all have varying degrees of importance and urgency. And so I think it's important to understand as we embark on this work what actually is part of a communications plan. So in my mind, I break it down into these areas, starting with probably the most important, which would be our urgent alerts. So these are our phone calls that we get for things like snow days and other emergencies. And they are crucial, and it is imperative that we have a strong system that is reliable and that's reaching all of the community members that need to be reached in a timely fashion. Kind of going down the chain, what I would consider probably one of the next most important aspects of communications plan is the district newsletters. Now, Principal Emig is sending home a newsletter on Fridays every week, which is comprehensive and includes quite a bit of information about the happenings in and around the school. And I think that is a critical vehicle for information going forward. And so that's going to be a key part of whatever plan and tools and platform we adopt going forward. Next, and probably of equal importance, is on a much more granular and individual level, is communications between parents and teachers. Now, these are often left out of larger district communication plans, and people often think of them as just, oh, it's a quick phone call or it's a quick email, but I think it is important as you're looking at communications as a whole to consider all aspects from top to bottom. And so to me, the ease of which a parent and a teacher can interact and communicate with one another and share information and share resources and documents and updates in real time is crucial. And there really is nothing more important than that in an educational setting. So that's definitely a piece of this. Then there's social media, which is kind of a more complex discussion, and we'll talk more about that at the end. But then we have all of these kind of lower level things which fall under the umbrella of a communications plan. So forms, payments, I mean, I can't tell you how many Google Forms we have sent out to the community and to the staff thus far this year alone. It's an important method for collecting information. It seems like there's a never-ending need to collect feedback and critical information from the community. And so we don't really have a formal way of doing that beyond just emailing out Google Forms at this point. And that poses a lot of issues. And then, of course, there come times when there need to be payments and things of that line, along those lines. And of course, that is a complicated thing. It's hard to track and it's hard to manage. Participation is really important for me as well. So this, I mean, volunteers for school events, involvement in parent-teacher conferences, any involvement where the community is physically scheduling time within the building, with teachers, with administration, etc. There is no real great way to manage that in a really reliable, safe, secure platform as we are doing it right now, and it becomes very clunky and unwieldy. And then, of course, there's our website and our branding. And that's really the face of our district, the face of our district outward to the greater community and then beyond Garrison. This is essentially the message that we're sending out that's saying, we are the Garrison School, and this is what we stand for, and this is what we value. I know there was a pretty major overhaul to the district website last year, and I think that was a great step in the right direction. However, I think there's a real opportunity for growth there as well. And again, we'll come back and talk about that. So when I'm referring to a communications plan, it really does encompass all of these and more items that need to be taken into consideration. So how will this process work? So we're already, as far as I'm concerned, part the way along in the process, but I really broke it down in my mind into 3 chunks, starting with really doing a deep dive into what the current state of communications is. And I've been doing this really since I started in the district over the summer, trying to understand, all right, what are the platforms we're using to communicate within the building, outside the building, to parents, etc. What are the pros and cons? What are the cost implications? What's working, what's not working? And again, that's work that I've been doing and conversations we've been having internally all school year. And so I feel like we're well on our way towards creating a new plan. The second aspect is obviously developing the new plan. It has to be effective and efficient. We'll talk more about that in a moment. What that actually looks like to me is kind of complex. And I've done a lot of research on this, and based on past experience, this is the most important thing, is the creation of our new plan. And so it's going to be based on a lot of conversations. So these are key interviews with community members, parents, school staff and personnel, students, understanding what the community is looking for. And fortunately, as I was beginning to build a community survey, yet another Google form, we have decided to merge it with some of our strategic coherence planning work, as we were going to do a community survey with that work. So we've been able to expand that survey to encompass questions about the communications plan as well. So that's actually essentially ready to go and going to be going out to the community in the next week or so. And so we're going to hopefully get a lot of insight and feedback at that point. Certainly the staff plays an important role, and so all year I've been having informal conversations about how teachers are communicating with parents, largely, what's working, what's not working, to better understand what the needs are there. And then it comes to identifying, well, what are our options going forward? And again, I've already started this work by having quite a few conversations with various vendors of different platforms. There are seemingly infinite platforms out there and tools that provide a variety of communications tools. And so I've already met with many of them. Sorry, I don't know what just happened there. I've already met with many of them and had demos and seen the products in action. I've also been able to interact with a lot of my counterparts in nearby districts to hear about what they're using and what has been successful and not successful. And of course, as part of that is an analysis of the cost involved. All of these platforms cost money, some more so than others. And so I've been looking carefully at what we are spending on our current setup and how that would compare to any possible changes. Finally is a larger discussion over our public face, and that's about branding and design. Something that I think, in my opinion, the district is currently lacking, and it's a real opportunity for growth there. And so that's going to be a key part of this process. Finally, once we create our plan, it's just going to be a matter of implementing it. So that means adopting our platform and onboarding anyone who's involved, which includes essentially the entire community, to varying degrees, and doing things like building out a website, developing our branding, and so forth. So it's an ongoing process that we hope to be working on throughout the year, depending on the feedback that we get. So that's how I envision this happening. Just pause for a moment. In case you're unaware, I want to look at the way that we're communicating with the community right now. We have a handful of tools and platforms that we're using to varying degrees of success, starting with our website. And again, we already mentioned, I know there was a significant upgrade to the website last year. You recognize it. But again, we'll talk more about that when we discuss branding, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here, both to streamline the content, make it more user-friendly and intuitive, and also just better looking and engaging for the viewer. Our messaging platform right now is Blackboard. So this is a tool that we purchased that we use for our urgent messaging as well as our bulk emailing. So this is how the district sends messages out on a large scale. It does have a lot of features to it. It allows us to send text messages, voice calls, emails, as well as it does have some social media integration, but anyone you speak to who uses it, it's a very unpleasant experience. It's not an intuitive tool. It is fraught with challenges. The most important challenge, of course, is does it have the most up-to-date information to reach the intended audience? And so just to give you a little bit background without getting too techie, it does integrate with our student information system, eSchool Data. And so on a daily basis, it is pulling the contact information from eSchool Data. So in theory, it should always have the most up-to-date information. In practice, it doesn't always succeed in doing that, and we can actually go in and tell how many people are not receiving the messages and what the issues are. And I can tell you there are definitely some issues, and it's challenging to manage. Just to give you one example, we recently built some groups within here so that we could contact the families of students who take particular bus routes within the district. Should a bus break down one day, we need to contact them. And that process alone took several days to complete and was much more complicated than it should have been. And so it is a challenging platform. It works, but I think everyone would agree there's room for growth with this as well. We have our weekly newsletter, which Principal Emig sends home using a platform that's called S'more, which is kind of a classic school newsletter tool. It certainly is functional and it has some nice features, but it also leaves, there's room for improvement in terms of the layout, the way the content is accessed, Just to give you one quick example of something that frustrates me, if you ever open up the weekly newsletter on your phone, you'll know it is not responsive to your phone, meaning it's tiny, you can't read it, it doesn't adjust to the screen of your phone, you have to actually click through to view it on the website. So if somebody is trying to read the newsletter on their phone, they pull it up, they're gonna be less likely to actually explore the content because it's tiny, tiny, tiny on their phone. It's kind of a drawback of the platform. So that's a key tool that we've been using. And then of course we have social media. We have a presence on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram. But then at the end of the day, like most people, our main platform for communications is just email. Okay, so we're using Gmail, of course. This is the primary way that parents and teachers are interacting. Any of the one-on-one or small group conversations are all done through email. And while it's effective, it's not ideal. It becomes very easy to lose content, you all know, within your email. And things get buried and you miss them easily. And so there are certainly some challenges with that. So those problems, the ones that I just kind of mentioned, really can be summarized here in that our current model is largely inefficient. There's a lot of wasted time. It can be very confusing as a parent knowing where to look for what and when. Certainly it's ineffective if we're not getting our messaging across, if we're not getting important announcements across to every single person who needs to get them, then it's a failure as a plan, as a system. One of my big concerns is this question of compliance. So I've been working a lot this year on all of these New York State regulations on data privacy and security. And one of the common practices that people don't even think twice about is whether or not we are compliant from the perspective of sending personally identifiable information through email, for example. Technically speaking, it's not correct to share any kind of personally identifiable email information through email because it's not a secure platform. And obviously that's concerning. We want to put our privacy of information at the forefront. And then finally, it's costly. The system we have uses a variety of tools and that cost adds up. So the goals for the new model, in my mind, are very simple. It should be easy. It should be simple, intuitive. It should be rock solid as far as its reliability, because we need to count on this to get information out, especially in the case of any sort of emergency, but also just on day-to-day communications, and effective at achieving its goals. So, after quite a bit of research and digging around, my preliminary vision is this. I would love to see the district cut down the number of platforms we use for community engagement from the more than 10, I just showed a few of them, but there are others, more than 10 right now, all the way down to 2. I would really like to see us streamlining everything and having all of our communications under one reliable umbrella. So those 2 tools to me are these. I would love to see us have a newly designed, welcoming, modern, functional, and intuitive website, as well as one single platform that allows us to complete all of those communications tasks that we talked about. So one umbrella under which we can do our urgent calls for snow delays, we can do our newsletters, we can do our social updates, like our key updates and sharing of photos and information, all the way down to parents and teachers communicating on a granular level about what's happening with an individual child. And those platforms do exist, and there are a handful of them, and from what I have seen, there are a couple of them that are real standouts in their functionality and their ease of use. So in my mind, if we can get to this point where we have these 2 very powerful, very modern and usable tools, we will have a truly effective communications plan. Now, that brings us to the last thing which I want to mention tonight. This is something that's important to me. It's something that I'm always interested in. My undergraduate work was in marketing, so I'm always looking at things through a marketing lens. My wife is a chief marketing officer, so I'm very focused on this, and I'm always thinking about it. And our website, and actually our branding as a whole, feels a little bit stale, and it feels like there's an opportunity to better communicate the things that we value in this district and the things that we're working towards. So why is it so important? Why is branding and then web design so important? So if we are able to develop a stronger brand, we'll be able to create and communicate what we value, our identity. And of course, part of the work we're doing right now with Jonathan Costa, as well as internally, is to really understand what is our identity, what do we value. We've created the wonderful vision of a graduate, and I think that's an integral part of this. I don't think the way the website stands right now, we're really communicating that. It also provides a really strong and impactful first impression to visitors, whether they're near or far. It builds trust. When you go to a website that is well designed and well thought out and easy to navigate, it builds trust both in and out of our community. And then one of the key things that I think is often ignored or not thought about is it will allow us to really draw in not only people to come to the community, but also prospective employees. We want to be able to be a school that people want to come to visit, to work at, to move to the community. And that starts with the website. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So the consistency is really key from top to bottom. If you look right now, just a quick search, we have a handful of different logos. This is one of the classic logos. This is on our letterhead. And it is lovely. I mean, that the old part of the school is a beautiful building. But the highest resolution version I could find was this one, which if I made it any bigger would have become pixelated and blurry and hard to read. And if you've looked at our letterhead, it's the same thing. And then we have this three-dimensional shiny cougar G, which I think it's effective if our mascot is the Cougars. But is that something that we as a district identify with? And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. But I do think that there's room for a more modern version. Then there's this, which is a combination of the both, which I've seen a few places. And then, of course, back to the website, which I will tell you this, something interesting. Before I came to the district, of course, when I first started meeting with Mr. Albano and talking about the position, of course, I went to the website to learn more about the district. And I have to tell you, it took me a while to even realize that there was a whole second part of the website that was dedicated to just the school. And that, I think, is largely because it's not the most logical layout, and it's being updated by multiple people, so there's kind of an inconsistency. And it's, you know, while the key information is certainly there, and you can find it if you dig around, the experience is not what I would call a more modern website experience. By the way, there is the school page. One of the other things that is interesting is the blues are different. Wait, sorry, I went back too far. Which I couldn't quite understand. The district page has a different blue than the school page. But again, these are things that can be fixed or addressed, obviously, in a redesign process. And then there's the newsletter, which pulls over some of those elements. We see the blue and we see that logo in the middle, but beyond that, you wouldn't know this is a Garrison school communication, right? So getting that branding across the board, I think, is really important. So, after doing some additional research, what I found is that, of course, in the business world, almost every company, when they create their brand, they have a brand design guidelines, a booklet that lays out exactly all of the different elements that are used in the branding and how to use them effectively. And more school districts are doing this as well. I pulled you can find a bunch of them online. I pulled one out that I could show you. Here's one. This is for the Richfield Public Schools, which, pardon me, I don't actually even know what state it's in. Anyway, if you go through, you'll see what these guidelines actually entail. They have everything that is related to the branding of the school, down to all of the different iterations of the logo, which you can see have a really cohesive feel, to things like alternate versions. This particular school has a logo and then a mascot, which are two separate things, as well as all sorts of different iterations, but all with a very cohesive feel. This is a larger district, of course. They actually have mascots for each individual school. They also tell you, it's interesting, what not to do with the logo, and that's all part of creating that consistent brand experience. Color palettes, so that everyone is on the same page when you're sending out a district communication, when you're doing a presentation on behalf of the district, trying to stick to a consistent set of colors, as well as typography and fonts. All of this is key to communicating this cohesive brand. Now, a lot of people might think, well, we're just a small school district outside of New York. Why do we need all of this? And the truth is, we certainly don't need something this extensive, but on the flip side of that, it is so important in communicating who we are. And I think it's worth the effort to create our own kind of visual identity. This one goes quite far. It talks about all sorts of things, how to actually, what type of language to use and so forth. So I don't know that we need to go that far, but it's interesting to see these things. Jumping on a little bit. So here's the biggest issue I have with school websites. I'm sure you guys have all visited many school websites, and if you do that, at the end of the day, they're all unique, but they all generally look the same. And the reason is there are about 2 or 3 different companies that do web design for schools. Final Site, Blackboard, which we use, etc. And these are all template-based programs, meaning the vast majority of websites are not custom designed. They give you a template, you click a few buttons, change a few colors, maybe change the text, and you're done. But at the end of the day, they all look the same. Case in point, the problem with templates, look at Mayapac's website, which is actually quite a nice, clean, modern-looking website. But then if you look at Carmel's website, if you notice anything, they're exactly the same, just slightly different. And while that's fine and they're effective at communicating and so forth, there's little individuality, there's little personal feel to it. And so I would like to see our district get away from that. The same is true of our district's website, by the as well. In Westchester, there are probably 4 or 5 other districts using not only Blackboard for their websites, but the same exact template as us, just with a different color. Which, again, it's not a huge deal, but I think we can strive to do better to communicate our brand. If you look, there are some interesting other schools and organizations that have done kind of nice, unique, very clean, modern things with their websites. Here are just a couple that I came across. This one, the Ocean School, is one of my favorites. It's a beautiful website. But you can see they all have a very distinct personality, and they really communicate what the institution is all about. So before I finish up, the last question I want to address, or rather topic that I want to bring up for consideration, is that of social media. So if you're not aware, the Garrison School currently has 3 social media platform accounts that are actively used: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can see our following on each of them. This was about a week ago, so it may have changed, but a few hundred followers on each platform. And so my question is are these social media accounts and platforms, are they actually having a net positive impact on our communications? What are they doing for us? And is there a cost to that? Now, I will tell you, just speaking in a very concrete way, there is a cost. It's a time cost. Right now, district staff, every time they want to post something, it's a process of collecting the resources, checking who is in, for example, the photos, and ensuring that they have permission to be published, getting names, getting information, and then logging into the platforms and making the post. It's not a huge commitment, but if we want to have a robust social media presence, that's a big time commitment. There are people whose entire jobs are just to manage social media accounts for schools and organizations. But on a larger level, I think we're at an interesting moment with social media where it's good to ask questions. As we know, there's been a lot of media coverage lately about different social media platforms, Facebook in particular, but certainly all of them. And there's definitely, I think it's an important moment in our society to consider our involvement in these platforms. And what is it giving to us, and what are we gaining from it? What is the community gaining from it? Versus, is there a drawback? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's a good moment to ask that question and consider the future of social media accompanying the Garrison School. So that's the end of what I was going to present. I'm happy to answer questions or continue the conversation. Sure.
Thank you. That was great. I'm going to open it up for questions. Jocelyn, David?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yeah, but
Well, mine is related to the, the community survey that you mentioned. So I want to talk to you, but I have this mic here. So I know that we've worked on it a little bit together because, like you mentioned, the planning committee is kind of working on this angle. So I just want to encourage you, anything else that you think before we send it out, because you packed in so much more here, maybe you want to add a little more without burdening the respondent.
Yes, absolutely.
But maybe we should just feel free.
Do it all at once.
As the person who's running it with Ned, our little team, we would be happy to add more questions if you.
That's great. We did include, so they created a wonderful survey related to the strategic coherence planning work, and we did already add some additional questions about communication, specifically about the website, I believe.
Just a couple, so if you want more.
Yeah, there's room to, I want to balance how long and, invasive it is to community members, but certainly I think that's a good idea. Thank you. We'll definitely do that.
David?
God, it's weird doing this with a mask on, and it still is.
It is.
So, I liked everything you were saying. I think you can go further with this. I was really struck last night by watching the election returns and seeing what apparently was a communications breakdown between parents in Virginia and schools and school administrators. And I'm just thinking about, because I think that where we are in the school right now is we have the potential to really be an exemplary school. It's a small school, but it can set standards and innovate in ways that can be meaningful for millions of other students, teachers, parents, and so on. So what occurs to me is that there are the leadership, and I'm sure that many of the people in the faculty have a lot of thoughts about where we are now, where we want to be, the distance between what we're doing and what we might be doing. We've already evolved. I mean, this is not the same school as it was when I was first on the board 7 years ago. So why not make some of that transparent, right? I mean, why not actually have, whether it's a podcast, which you do, whether it's blogs, but something that would give Carl, Allison, teachers, you, and it's so great to have you here. It really is. I mean, because you really get this stuff.
Thank you.
And just figure out ways to make transparent the kind of curricular decisions that are being made, how we're dealing with various new forms of teaching, what works, what doesn't work. Maybe we did something in whatever project-based learning that we thought was going to be great, but it didn't work. So let's be transparent about it. Talk about it. So I think that there are a lot of things that you can do along those lines that would add real value to what you're proposing here.
I agree completely. When I speak of the website right now is very informational. It's loaded with links to PDFs, which are necessary and things like that. But what it's light on is values and actions and interesting ways of communicating glimpses inside the building. I think that's a wonderful idea. I mean, I would love to have a podcast series where we could interview teachers and interview students on a regular basis. I think it's a much more intimate medium than, say, just putting text on there, or even video in a lot of ways. So I certainly think you're right. I am open to any and all opportunities. I think we can make anything happen, which is great. So yeah, that's how I look at this. We're starting from here, and we have endless opportunities to do all sorts of innovative things. I think it's a great idea.
A bunch of questions down here.
I'm not going to skip a question, but I'm just going to say, sounds like you just volunteered yourself for teaching a middle school elective.
I'll do that in between recording the podcast episode. yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to go to Matt, then Kent, then Courtney, and then Madeline. I'm going to write that down.
I feel like you opened a really interesting door into the social media question. It sounded, correct me if I'm misinterpreting, like you might come down on the side of thinking the drawbacks of being on some of those things might outweigh the positives, and you sort of posed it as a question mark. If we could replace the question mark with a period, I'm curious for your opinion. Do you think we should be on those social media places? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Sure.
I'm not asking in a loaded way. I'm totally curious what your opinion is, because I don't have one.
I'm glad you asked. I definitely framed it as a conversation starter because it really does need to be a conversation. If you're asking me my personal opinion, I will tell you two interesting anecdotes. One I shared with Carl earlier is, first of all, I personally, like everyone in the free world, was on Facebook, right? And for years and years and years, and then decided to deactivate it because I found it was just draining my time and it was causing all sorts of complicated comparison feelings to all of these. It's a complicated thing. And so I got to a point where I just deactivated it. And the only social media that I continue with is Twitter. And the reason I'm on Twitter is purely professional. I follow a wonderful community of educators and thinkers and so forth, and I bring a lot of that to my professional work. So I see it's very valuable. However, I will also say that more and more I have been finding myself falling into the traps that a lot of people fall into, which is this kind of sense of how am I ever going to keep up, or how am I ever going to compare. Even on Twitter, it's just a constant flood of just wonderful, amazing things happening. And on one hand, it's inspirational, but on the other hand, it's potentially upsetting. And so I have conflicted feelings about it. As far as the district, if you ask my own personal opinion, I think the cons outweigh the pros. I don't see us getting a lot out of it. And with all of the negativity surrounding social media, if we're going to set an example for particularly our middle school students and younger, I think it's an opportunity for us to make a statement as a district, perhaps by saying, as a result of our conflicted feelings about some of the ethical decisions of some of these companies, we are opting not to participate in the platform. And I think that has the potential to really speak volumes, as opposed to following the bandwagon and doing what every other district does, which is maintain these accounts, which could, in theory, send a message to students, oh, it's important to be on social media, and I'm going to do it, and we all know that that poses a lot of challenges, particularly for teenagers. So my personal feeling is that not only would I like to see us not necessarily use it and utilize this beautiful new website and platform that I'm proposing we build, but also go as far as to potentially have a statement on our website that explains our stance. You know, our social media abstention statement. This is, as a district, we've decided not to pursue it, and here's why. So that's my personal feeling. I know it's a very complex topic, and there are a lot of sides to it, and I definitely think it warrants a discussion.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Ken?
Thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of information there. I guess, having done some of this in my past lives and in my current life, I guess my question is, what ultimately is the goal of the website? Is it a utility, or is it a branding exercise? Because you want people to come in and dive in and experience things, but I would venture to guess that the majority of the traffic is going there for a purpose for information. It is not necessarily trying to have an experience. So I'd like to get your perspective on that. I'd love to know if you have any analytics on traffic on the website. What are people actually doing there? What are they searching for? I'm guessing they're looking to see if it's an A day or a B day. A lot of times, not necessarily. So, as we think about what the website is going forward, I would just urge you to really consider, maybe even have an opportunity to separate out the experiences, because the last thing someone wants is a heavy experience where they can't find that one piece of information. They have to click around and look for it. And I think you said that you think that's happening now, so that
Sure.
would be important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's critical. I mean, you have to have information on your website. People are going there for information, and it has to be there. It could be there in an improved way. But my big approach is, if we go and fully dedicate ourselves to this communications platform that I'm talking about, and we ensure that every community member who has interest, of course, all parents, teachers, board, etc., are within it, but then also any interested community members are able to access it as well. That becomes our vehicle for the day-to-day, right, for the key information. And certainly that's a process. It's a little hard to demonstrate this without explaining more about the platforms that I have in mind, but essentially they are a vehicle that allow us to push out very regular updates of information, all the way down to today is a B day, all the way up to full weekly or quarterly superintendent newsletters if we choose to do that. That then becomes the place to go and get those pieces of information that people are looking for all the time. And the hope is they would have it on their phone with them at all times. Whereas if I'm looking to see what day it is, navigating to the website, finding my way around the website, which is not a wonderful experience on a phone, and then finding that information is clunky. Whereas if we separate out the purposes of the two platforms and really communicate that and clarify, this is for your day-to-day information, this is just telling the story of Garrison. And of course there's overlap, but that's the way I envision this, really going full steam ahead with the platform, the communications tool. And that becomes the source of every bit of information you would need.
So I look forward to hearing more about that.
Sure.
I certainly can't judge since I don't know what it is, but I would just also challenge you that related to social media and this new platform, it's going to be challenging to change parent behavior to adapt different platforms because we want them to.
That's right.
So I don't love Facebook. Nobody loves Facebook. Facebook is successful not because it's great. It's successful because that's where people are. And so do we hurt ourselves by walking away from an opportunity to communicate with parents and the community by saying we don't like Facebook? And I'm not sure that as a business, we're a business, we're a government entity, we're trying to communicate with our community. Mm-hmm. Walking away from a platform makes a statement, but it doesn't necessarily benefit us in the long run. I would question that. I mean, in reality, it says something to the students, but when they go out into the world, if they need to communicate with people, they're going to have to understand how to use Facebook and those platforms. So I'm a little conflicted on that. I'm not sure that making a statement does anything, but at the end of the day, maybe harm us.
You're right, and that may be true. And I'm certainly conflicted on it as well. Speaking as someone who's been the one posting to Facebook in the last couple of weeks for the district, it's been little snapshots of interesting things that have been happening in the school, and that is hugely valuable for the community and other people to have access to. And I think you're right. Certainly, if we were going to make a major transition, it's a lot of work and a lot of outreach and a lot of community training and so forth. But we have to ultimately look and say, well, where do we want to end up and what's the right model for us? And most likely it's somewhere in the middle. But that's what this process is about. So
that's great. Thank you.
Courtney's next. Most of my questions have been asked. Again, thank you for this presentation. This has been much needed. This attention to the communications of the district is really huge. One thing I guess really, this is also my own, away from the board, I'm like completely lacking in words tonight anyway, but this is my territory. So it's almost like, I'm like, I want to jump on a committee and help. So it's more about throwing out ideas. One thing is that we've struggled with in the past is how to communicate with the larger community, not just parents. Website is great, and everybody knows how to Google and find a website, but in terms of, reaching our voters, the people who live in the community, maybe people who come up on the weekend, just something to think about. I don't know what the answers are. Assuming, you'd said, looking through all of this, you'd be, gathering input from teachers. I know a big thing for the younger grades are teachers sharing photos of kids with parents. We've talked about this before where it's all over the place and everybody uses 19 different things. I assume that's something that is wrapped up in one of these platforms you're looking at.
Absolutely.
I'd be curious what the typical followers are on social media for other school districts. I appreciate that you posted those numbers. I don't think any of us, we haven't had a major social media presence, so I don't think anybody's going to the Garrison School Facebook page to see if it's a snow day. But maybe other schools do. I'd be curious of how other schools utilize it more than perhaps just a presence or of sharing snapshots or not. And my last one is, what's the basic time frame that for all of this?
All right. So let me see if I can. All right. So the first thing I want to communicate, and again, this is hard to do without talking about specific tools, but the handful of platforms that I have researched and gotten feedback from other districts on, and in my mind would be the finalists that we would consider actually going with. Just to clarify, they both have embedded social media functionality, so that if I am a staff member and I have access, I can post a photo, and when posting it, I can choose where it goes. I can send it to one class's parents, to the elementary school parents, to the entire school parents, to the larger community. I can also click a button and send it to our website because it has the ability for us to have a small embedded section on our website that shows the latest posts that were shared to the website. It also has share to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram on there as well. So should we choose to stay with social media, then this platform will still, at the very least, streamline that process and make it all much easier. So that's something to consider. Additionally, the website will, in my mind, I hope I didn't miscommunicate it. It has to have information. It has to have up-to-date information, timely information. My vision is just for it to be, first of all, better designed, easier to navigate, but also less of just a file cabinet of content and more of a digital experience, right, where you're really learning about the district. But of course, complete with those updates. So keep that in mind. I'm losing my train of thought here. I forgot the other things.
Well, it's probably because I threw like 19.
Yeah.
But also the time frame.
Yeah, the big question is time frame.
Oh, time frame, yes. So it really is up to what we all decide collectively. I think it's very real time frame to have an updated website available in the next 4 months this year. As far as adopting a platform, we have to be careful and consider that because of certainly the configuration setup time, there are APIs that have to be set up to connect it to our student data, there's testing and so forth, and then there's going to be a significant effort towards involving the community, training the community. Not that it's difficult, but you know, a communications platform is only effective if people are involved with it. So that's going to be a big effort by the district, certainly internal training. Fortunately, all of these platforms are incredibly intuitive and it's not a real heavy lift. But in my mind, I would love to see us begin the work with a new platform in the spring and then have officially start the next school year on that platform. That's what I envision happening. I think it's certainly reasonable. Wait, there was one other thing that you had asked that I just thought about. Oh, the community, yes, thank you. So certainly, I don't want to leave that out. I think that is critical because there are definitely community members who we want to be involved, certainly budget votes and things like that, but also involved in the school district, even if they don't have children in the school. And the two main platforms I'm looking at have wonderful solutions for that. You can actually create sign-up pages for non-parents where they can subscribe to the Garrison School feed and also receive these updates. And so, of course, it would have to be publicized and communicated so that they would participate, but it's certainly not out of the question. We're not creating a lockdown silo here that only parents can participate in. We're creating a platform to send our information out, and when we need to send it to just one person, we can do that. When we need to send it to one small group, we can do that. When we need to send it to the community at large, we can do that as well, which is why these platforms are so appealing, because they have that flexibility built in.
Thank you. Madeline?
Thank you for the presentation. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think that's the right thing to do. I personally think it's simpler, it's more efficient, much better and straightforward. And I think that it can also have both really good content and really good branding and a better experience, where you can go in, have a really, really cool website, get what you need, but also that, you know, the aesthetics is good and that is consistent branding and that you get the content fast. So the last time the website was designed, I think it was done more in-house. So my question is, especially when we're talking about branding, and if we really want this to work, is the recommendation to go out to a professional branding company? There's the Pentagram out there. There's a lot of really, really good company. They come in and lead us through the process, but at the end of the day, it's usually worth it. So I guess that's my question. What's the next step, or is it more the thought to keep it in-house and design it in-house?
So that's a great question, and definitely something I've thought about. I am a 100%, I consider myself good with these things, but I'm not a designer, and I don't necessarily think that anyone within the district probably has the time or wherewithal to do the job that I think we want as a community. So I think it's worthwhile to bring someone in. We of course want to be mindful of cost as well as time. So I think it's going to be a mixture of. The other thing to consider, by the way, is the platform that the website is built on. These school-directed website tools, I mentioned Final Site, K-12, there are a bunch of them. One of the reasons I want to get away from them is because they are designed for very large districts where you're going to have 20 or 30 or 40 staff members in a district regularly updating the website. So their focus is on the CMS, or the content side, on the back end, so they have these very robust account-based editing tools and so forth, which frankly is just not really necessary in a district our size. So while I think it's worthwhile spending the money on a designer to develop our brand and our brand guidelines, I think we can then save money on the implementation by avoiding the use of one of these traditional school platforms. And there we have a lot of options available to us, which I'm exploring already. And so, yes, I've already begun the process, by the way, of exploring designers and reaching out to people. Like I said, I have some personal contacts who are professional designers in the city and things like that, and so I'm always looking to get us a deal and make sure that we have a really high-quality product, but at a reasonable price. But yes, that conversation started, and the process is happening.
Just one more quick question. I don't know if somebody else was in line.
I have some questions, and then I'm going to come back and go around to everybody else real quick. First of all, I want to say I think you've saved us money already by not going out to a consultant for this part of the process, which I greatly appreciate you doing, because I do want to be mindful of the budget. The thing I'd like to really make sure we keep in mind are the board's policies and that aspect from a compliance issue. We've updated a number of our policies within the past year, including, I believe, the Title IX. Some of these policies require us as a district to make sure that we're translating everything. We're now translating on the website. It would be great to incorporate that into any newsletters, make sure that people are receiving the information they need in the language they're able to read it in. And then other compliance issues. This is where I have an issue with social media. I am concerned that we may get the difficulty with managing whose image we can upload, how we can upload those images, do we have the right to use them? I again have a compliance question regarding what teachers send out individually when they email out to other parents. Are we allowed to send those images of those children out from a teacher's account? I know the law around this is changing rapidly, and I want to make sure that as a district we don't end up in an area where we're not compliant. And then when we come to the social media issue, who is currently monitoring to make sure, like, the amount of time that must go into making sure we don't have negative comment? You know, if a conversation explodes over a picture that has one of our children in it and has a negative comment, who is going to go in there and use that time? I want to be very mindful that we are not adding a burden to our faculty as time.
Yes. So the answer is me right now, which is it's definitely, I mean, fortunately we don't have a huge following and we don't have a tremendous amount of activity on social media. And so it is manageable, but it's, you know, if we commit to social media and we do it right with regular posts and interactivity with the community and things like that, it is a very time-consuming job to manage that, and that's certainly one of the considerations. About the compliance issue, yes, that's been one of the things I've been working a lot on this year. I've been in webinar after webinar on all of the DPS and state requirements around compliance. And we definitely have some work to do. One of the wonderful things about these platforms that I keep alluding to is they're all under lock and key and they're all compliant with Ed Law 2D. And so teachers can safely and freely share photos throughout the day, or even more sensitive information, report cards and things like that, with parents, and it's all secure. Everything's encrypted, and it's under the lock and key of the accounts. which is a huge benefit. Right now, I mean, we get requests all the time from other schools for students' records and things like that, and there is no real great way that we have in-house to send it in a secure way. You can send encrypted emails and things like that, but it's a process, and so this solves a lot of those issues. Certainly managing the media permissions list it's a big task every year. I mean, this year, at the beginning of the year, we had quite a few students on it, and a lot of teachers said, that's strange, I'm surprised that student is on there. And so there was a lot of reaching out individually to parents to confirm, and there were a lot of errors. People checked off a box in error and so forth. So it's not a great process. And so by moving all of that to a secure platform, we eliminate a lot of those concerns, but can still freely share content, which is the goal.
Thank you.
Sure.
We'll go to Ken.
I just wanted to ask if we, I know we were using Blackboard for a lot of these things. There are 10 different tools. Do we have contracts with any of them that are beyond this year? Like, what's our exposure to future costs on things that we might not use?
Sure. So we are contracted with Blackboard through this school year, as far as I know. So that would be for our website, our communications platform, and so we are able to continue using those throughout the year, but not beyond that. I don't quote me on that, but I'm 99% sure not beyond the end of the school year, which would allow us to make the move without much of an issue. And then, of course, if we were to begin with, for example, a new communications platform in the spring, it would be prorated, so we would only be paying for a few months in the school year. So from a cost perspective, making the shift on the earlier side would not be a huge hit, and it would give us the cushion of, not finding ourselves without a website, for example, or without a platform. So.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Do I have other follow-up, David?
On the social media point, it sounds like what sounds like an underwhelming number of people who make use of our website platforms is an argument is another argument for discontinuing it, because to change that, to increase the number of people who use it would, as you point out, be a very time-consuming piece of work for you or whoever manages it.
Sure, absolutely.
Those are
Yeah.
arguments against doing.
Yeah, I agree. It's a complicated question. It really is. There are people, I'm sure, in the community who would be unhappy to see us discontinue the use of Facebook. And so it is a complicated question, but it's all, weighing the pros and cons and figuring out what makes the most sense for us. We are a small district, so manpower is at a premium, and we have to make sure we're using our time effectively.
Thank you. Do I have further questions, comments regarding this? I have one last one. Do you need us to reach consensus on any of these this evening? Where would you like to walk away from this with?
That's a great question. So what I would like is the support of the board to continue the process as I outlined it. So at this point, still in kind of an information gathering phase, we are on the verge of sending out this community survey, which I think will be very helpful in providing us more information. I would love to potentially get together a committee to work a little bit on the branding question, because that's a complex one. I don't think any one individual should make that decision necessarily for the district. And then, as well as, I would love the opportunity later on to make a proposal on the platform and be able to demonstrate what the communications platform is capable of, and of course, have the blessing of the community to go forward with that. Because I do think it's an important shift. It has a major impact on every stakeholder in the district. But at this point, I think the key is continuing the process of fact-finding and gathering, and then coming back and then making some decisions.
Okay, I think that sounds reasonable. Do we have consensus to continue the fact-finding? It looks like we do. In terms of a committee, if you're thinking of a task force, limited term, with board members, maybe reaching out to community, I just want to be mindful that we've also tapped our faculty a lot for committees, and that we don't we can certainly open it up to them for input, but maybe not a requirement at this point, so that we are mindful of their time.
Absolutely.
And
I agree.
possibly our board members' time as well, but I'm really easily willing to give away your time more than our teachers.
Well, the good thing is a lot of that can be done remotely. We can start to collect, brand identities and share them out, and people can share their opinions and so forth. It doesn't have to necessarily be a formal, face-to-face process if we choose that.
Great.
All right.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
You.
All right.
Did you enjoy the podium? What did you
It's fantastic. It's so much better than that previous one. It's beautiful. Wonderful job, Dusty.
Okay. Next, we'll be moving on to a debriefing of the NYSSBA convention and business meeting from our liaison, Madeline, Julian. Madeline, do you want to stay in your seat, or do you want to try the podium?
I'll stay in the seat.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll start with the convention was canceled. It was scheduled to be in Midtown, New York. It was canceled due to COVID. They did have a one-day member event on October 25th, and they also did hold the business meeting on the 18th. I attended that along with 276 delegates. So I was the representative for the Garrison School. Voted on all of the resolution as discussed on our previous meeting on the 16th. No real surprises. There was only one surprise, and that was resolution number 15 that had to do with capturing data and creating metrics for innovatives that mitigate the damaging effect associated with climate change. So unfortunately, that didn't pass, but all of the other ones that we voted on passed. Everyone was upset about that. I heard it in the virtual meeting. Then there were 5 other late resolutions that were added that didn't make it to come up to vote. One of them was to remove the mask mandate. So we were all glad that we stayed till the very end to make sure that those didn't pass, or at least that we were represented on that. And the next meeting, or the next NYSSBA convention, will be in Albany next year in October around the same time. So if there are any resolutions that we would like to propose as a district, it's never too early to start drafting them up. That's it.
Do you have any questions for Madeline?
Just out of curiosity, how does the representation of voting work? Like, do you have the same amount of a vote as like a Westchester district, a larger district?
Yeah, so right now, we only have one delegate. I'm assuming that every district, I don't know, do you know this, Carl? Every district would probably have one delegate?
I believe so, but I'm not 100% certain, Madeline.
So that might explain why something like a climate change resolution might not pass, because there are more, it's one district, one vote? Or I'm just trying to understand like what the politics of that.
Not all the districts participate
Okay.
with NYSSBA as well, too.
And it was a close call. It was by 5%, so it was almost there.
Madeline, you know how when we looked at the resolutions, there was the NYSSBA recommended yeses and then the NYSSBA recommended noes. Were any of those noes surprisingly passed as yeses? Don't just tell me later.
There was one. I made note of it.
Okay.
That we had voted yes, and NYSSBA had voted no, and that it did pass. But the one on climate, NYSSBA had voted yes on. And they were also surprised when it didn't pass.
Is it an anonymous vote, or are we marked down with our positions, for example?
They show us the vote. I marked exactly how we voted on, and the percentage of on how the vote passed. I can share that with
No, I
everyone.
was just curious if districts can be held accountable for how they voted or not. You know what I mean? But
No, I think they just put the results.
It's just anonymous.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it might, I'm wondering if because they had to go to virtual, and this is usually an in-person business meeting.
Right.
I'm wondering how that affected the voting process as well, because
Yeah.
I believe you can see the delegate from the different districts. One of the benefits of being in person, which is, I really appreciate that you were willing to go, is to network and meet these other districts and
Yes.
hear their experiences. But
Yes.
which you definitely lose that on
Yeah.
Zoom. Any other questions or comments regarding the NYSSBA convention?
Oh, I have one last item. I forgot. So our area director was voted to be president of NYSSBA this year. So her name is Peggy Zugib. So our area director will be NYSSBA president, which is great. And we are in Area 10, which is, it's a large area, Westchester all the way up here. So that's something very exciting.
That's great. Okay. Thank you, Madeline. All right, we will move on now. President's remarks. I will be very brief this evening as well. First, I wanted to say a thank you for a very successful Drop Everything and Read week. Courtney McCarthy helped arrange the authors. I know Kyoko Gelber did a great job with the book fair, and all of the PTA and GSEF for supporting and funding the efforts. It was wonderful to have this event back. Also wonderful for anyone who attended to see parents again out reading with their kids. And having access to at least the outdoor portion of the school was really nice, and seeing our community starting to gather again. I also want to thank the Desmond Fish Library for welcoming all of our students and classes. They'll be making field trips over there. We've done a lot of field trips, which is to the credit of our administration, our teachers, and of course the transportation group for coordinating all of this. I know these kids have been in the forest a lot and will now be going to the library. So thank you to the Desmond Fish. And then one last note on the Garrison Children Education Fund. Their grant deadline is November 12th for anyone in the community who wishes to submit a grant. And their fall appeal is ongoing if you wish to donate to help fund those grants, which is even more important, I think. All right, that's all I've got. Carl?
Okay. And good evening. Just echoing Sarah's comments, I want to give a sincere thank you to every parent, community member who participated in Deer Week. What a great celebration of literacy. And you look at our audience, we have a few students here with books in their hands, and really promoting literacy was I think, the biggest reward. Everywhere I turned, we had students reading. Immersed in books, and that really is something to see, and again, something to celebrate. So thank you to all of you. Also, I have just a second announcement, which is to recognize our staff, our faculty, as well as our administrative team for a very successful Superintendent's Conference Day yesterday. So when our students had off, the teachers were here working. We had a number of very productive activities. One of the main focuses of Conference Day was training on our new Envisions Mathematics program. As you may recall, Mrs. Amig presented that program back in the spring. We rolled it out this September, but the training is ongoing. It's not just something that you put in a teacher's hands and they run with it and teach. There's ongoing training that will happen throughout this year and even into next school year. So that was very productive, organized by Mr. Sammartano. Also in the area of ELA, Mrs. Amig led our ELA department on looking at the next-gen standards, doing standards crosswalks, which is looking at the previous curriculum and the new standards and what shifts need to occur. We also had our two counselors working on SEL initiatives and a number of teachers working on new electives. We also ran some safety trainings for our support staff, our aides, and our facilities people. Had some online trainings on safety and some required training. So all in all, it was a very productive day. And I just thought it was worth sharing that, and we thank everyone who participated.
Thank you, Carl. Do you have any questions for Carl? Okay. I just realized we missed the public comment that we had moved, and I apologize for that by moving it. Would you like me, Dusty, to go back and put it in now?
Yeah, we could jump back.
Okay. All right. So we'll now go to the public comment section of our meeting. I don't believe anyone signed up.
Jameson sign up.
Seneca.
Okay. Then I will now read this and we will move on. I apologize for that. Next up, we have committee reports. We have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Jocelyn, Chair.
Thank you. So we all met as a committee, a full committee last week on Zoom because it was the crazy rainy day. We were going to have it be in person, but then we swiftly moved it to Zoom so everyone could get home. There's a really great crowd that includes administrators, teachers, and faculty, and a lot of parents. And I think we all realize that if we were really going to try to tackle that strategic plan or the work plan that we adopted as a board, that it's a lot of work. So we pretty much formed a small subgroup that's going to look at that work plan again and identify some short-term goals that we could maybe accomplish as a school this year, not to overburden the teachers who are working out of boxes and so that group is going to try to then identify those short-term goals and then bring them to the full committee so we can actually get some work done. But it's a daunting plan, but one of the messages that people were kind of bringing forth in the meeting was, don't let this work get put to the back burner though. You know, it's too easy to do that, and we have formed this committee for a reason. We're bringing it up for a reason. People are involved for a reason. So if, stay on course as much as we can to try to address some of the action items that are in the work plan as soon as we can. So I feel very committed, and I feel that the group is committed to pushing through and trying to get some of this executed. So it was a good meeting. Any questions? Did I miss anything? Courtney, you were there. No? Good?
Good summary.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now we move on to accepting the minutes. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the minutes of the regular meeting of October 20th, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any questions or comments on the minutes as presented? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Now move on to the personnel items, the consent agenda. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves the items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Carl, did you want to speak to the consent agenda?
Sure. We just have two items this evening. The first are winter coaching appointments. We have Coach Keegan returning. He also coached soccer this fall and has done a great job for us. Of course, Mr. Keegan is a retired Garrison teacher. And also a second gentleman, Van Vorlidis, has been recommended by Mr. Beckley. He has coached modified basketball for Garrison in the past. In total, he has about 13 years of basketball coaching experience and has been highly recommended by our AD. Additionally, the second agenda item is to approve an agreement. We have a very dedicated employee, Pat Martz, who does our payroll, works in our business office. And last year, she was unable to use 4 vacation days. There were a lot of transitions, as you know. Mr. Jimmick came on board in February, and Pat really held things together in the payroll department. And when she had the ability to take those vacation days, because there were many things that had to be accomplished in the business office, she decided not to and was willing to lose those days. We did this for a few other employees. We were not aware of Pat several months ago, but when I learned of this, Joe and I spoke, and we bring this to the board hoping you would consider allowing her to carry over those 4 days. I think it would be a nice thing to do for her, and she's a very dedicated employee, and she would appreciate that. And those are the two items.
Thank you, Carl. Do I have any questions
for Carl regarding the consent agenda?
Well, I'm just intrigued by this notion of modified basketball. Is that for old folks too? I mean, it's like no running, no jumping, that kind of thing? Or-
You have to be in 7th or 8th grade, David.
We could enroll in 7th or 8th grade.
I don't know, the math is pretty hard.
Wouldn't be the first time rules were bent for sports.
Okay. We're going to go to a vote now. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Thank you. And David, let me know how your basketball career goes. Next, we have new business, the CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approve the Committee on Special Education and Committee on Preschool Special Education recommendations and student placements 17297, 17544, 17416. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Move to a vote on this. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Next, we have the approval of hourly rate for substitute bus drivers. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves the rate of $19.25 per hour for substitute bus drivers. May I have a motion, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Carl, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. This is an increase from $18 to $19.25. To be honest with you, it's not much of an increase, but Joe and I spoke about this and felt that this hourly rate should be consistent with the hourly rate of our permanent bus drivers and custodians. However, bus drivers are in high demand. It's all over the news that there's a true shortage, and we do have one local person who's reliable and does a great job for us and is willing to work part-time. So I thought at least this is a gesture that we appreciate his willingness to work with us when we need a substitute driver.
Do you have any questions? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay, we have already done public comment, so we will move on to board member comment. Jocelyn, I'll start with you.
No comment.
Okay, David?
Nope.
Madeline?
No comment.
Courtney?
Nope.
Kent?
No, thank you.
Okay. Matt? I got one.
Matt, I didn't say a comment, and I'm betting that you're gonna say it.
I think we all.
But I was leaving it for you. We need to relax.
We have a bet
So
going on
the
this.
vaccine's been approved, which is wonderful news for 5 to 11-year-olds. Sounds like it'll be widely available as soon as next week in pharmacies and pediatrician offices. So try to have everyone fit it into their busy work and school schedules and help us get back to more normal school experience for everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And I'm last, and I will just add to that while it was approved late last night, if anyone has any questions regarding, vaccine clinics and whatnot, those plans have not been put in place yet, as we just found out last night, and I'm sure Putnam County Department of Health will inform us if there are any vaccine clinics in our area for ages 5 to 11, or the best path forward if it is indeed pediatricians' offices and whatnot. Okay, that is all I've got. We do not have a need for an executive session this evening, which brings me to adjournment. Get this computer turn really in record time. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby adjourns the regular meeting of November 3rd, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. Please turn off your computers, log out, and whatever else you need to do at 8:18. Woohoo.